The metallic clang echoed through the cargo bay as another crate of salvage crashed onto the deck of the human mining station. Perseverance. Chief Engineer Kex Valorn wiped grease from his hands and glared at the hegemony transport ships retreating. "Form through the observation port. Another shipment of their garbage," muttered his assistant, Nim Kordash, as she pried open the crate's seal. Inside lay twisted chunks of what had once been hegemony battlecruiser hull plating, scorched plasma conduits, and shattered crystalline matrices that sparked weakly with residual energy. The Corvanian hegemony had ruled this sector for 3 millennia, their sleek vessels cutting through space with an arrogance that matched their disdain for the primitive human colonies scattered along their borders. When humanity had finally made contact 7 years ago, the Corvanians had offered them a deal wrapped in diplomatic silk but lined with thorns. Humans could mine the asteroid belts in exchange for technological assistance and protection. The technological assistance came in the form of hegemony refuse, battle-damaged components, outdated systems, and equipment deemed too obsolete for their pristine fleets. The protection came with a price tag that grew steeper each quarter. Kex picked up a fragment of what appeared to be a power coupling, its alien geometry both beautiful and frustrating. "You know what this is, Nim? Junk with delusions of grandeur? This is a quantum resonance matrix from their shield generators. Look at the crystal lattice structure." He held it up to the light, revealing intricate patterns within. "They think we're too stupid to understand what they're throwing away." Nim activated her scanner, watching the readings spike erratically. "The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. How are they even generating power at this efficiency?" "That's what we're going to find out." Kex's jaw tightened as he remembered the latest communication from Hegemony Sector Commander Erix Nethelin. Another demand for increased tribute, delivered with the casual contempt of a master addressing a particularly slow pet. As they sorted through the debris, patterns began to emerge. Kex had been studying hegemony waste for 3 years now, and his trained eye caught details that would have escaped notice before. The way certain components were fused together, the harmonic frequencies that still hummed in dormant crystals, the peculiar metal alloys that seemed to shift color under different lighting. "Nim, remember that theoretical paper Dr. Hollick published last year? The one about multi-dimensional energy channeling? The one the hegemony laughed at when they accessed our scientific databases?" "The very same." Kex grinned, a predatory expression that would have surprised anyone who knew him as the usually mild-mannered engineer. "I think our alien friends just gave us the components to prove his theory correct." The next 6 hours passed in a blur of calculations, measurements, and heated discussions. As the station's 3 shifts cycled through their routines, miners returning from the belt, processors refining raw materials, families going about their daily lives, Kex and Nim worked with growing excitement. "The plasma flow coefficients are all wrong according to human physics," Nim said, pulling up holographic displays. "But if we adjust for quantum uncertainty at the subatomic level, then the impossible becomes merely improbable." Kex nodded, staring at the readouts. For years, humans had wondered how hegemony ships achieved such devastating firepower from relatively compact weapons. Now, piece by piece, discarded component by discarded component, the answer was literally falling into their hands. The irony wasn't lost on him. In their arrogance, the Corvanians had created the very tool that might level the playing field. 3 weeks after the revelation, Perseverance had transformed from a simple mining station into something resembling a mad scientist's laboratory. Every available workspace hummed with activity as teams of engineers, physicists, and even miners turned technicians worked around the clock dissecting hegemony technology. Dr. Voss Rimmel, the station's chief physicist, had initially been skeptical of Kex's theories. Now he stood transfixed before a holographic display showing energy patterns that defied conventional understanding. The quantum tunneling effect is orders of magnitude more efficient than anything we've achieved, he whispered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. They're not just channeling energy, they're borrowing it from parallel dimensional states. Across the lab, specialist Jax Corridon looked up from a partially reconstructed plasma relay. Doc, you need to see this. I've been mapping the neural network pathways in their targeting systems. It's not artificial intelligence, it's something else entirely. The breakthrough had come when NIM discovered that hegemony components weren't just machines. They were hybrid constructs that bridged the gap between technology and something approaching life. Each crystalline matrix contained quantum-entangled particles that responded to specific electromagnetic frequencies, creating a web of instantaneous communication across entire ship systems. It's like they've weaponized intuition, Kex explained during their daily briefing. Their ships don't just calculate firing solutions, they feel them. Station Commander Leda Greymark had been monitoring their progress with growing alarm and excitement. Kex, you realize what you're suggesting? If we can replicate even a fraction of this technology, we stop being victims. His voice carried a steel edge that surprised everyone, including himself. 7 years, Commander. 7 years of bowing and scraping to aliens who see us as barely evolved apes. 7 years of watching them take our resources while throwing us scraps. The work continued with religious fervor. Mining operations scaled back as every available hand joined the research effort. Families contributed their electronics, their tools, anything that might provide components for the growing project taking shape in the station's largest cargo bay. NIM had christened it the synthesis engine, a hybrid construct that combined human engineering ingenuity with recovered hegemony quantum matrices. It looked like no weapon ever built by either species. A sleek, organic-seeming device that pulsed with inner light and seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. The power requirements are astronomical, warned Chief Power Technician Gorix Handel. We'd need to channel the entire station's reactor output just for a test firing. Then we channel it, Greymark replied firmly. If this works, if we can, prove that humans aren't the technological inferiors the hegemony believes us to be, everything changes. The test came on a Tuesday that would later be remembered as the day humanity stopped apologizing for existing. They had constructed a target from decommissioned mining equipment positioned at the edge of the system's outer asteroid belt. The synthesis engine powered up with a sound like singing crystal, its hybrid systems reaching operational parameters that registered off the scale of their instruments. Kex's hands trembled slightly as he initiated the firing sequence. Around him, every person on the station held their breath. Through the communication channels, he could hear similar tension on the dozens of other human outposts throughout the sector. Word had spread, and everyone was watching. The beam that erupted from their weapon didn't look like conventional human laser weaponry, or even the plasma bolts favored by the hegemony. It was something altogether new. A stream of coherent energy that seemed to bend space around itself, reality rippling in its wake. The target didn't just disintegrate, it ceased to exist, as if the fundamental forces holding its atoms together simply forgot how to function. In the weapon's wake, space itself seemed to shimmer for several moments before settling back into normal dimensions. My God, breathed Dr. Rimmel. We didn't just match their technology. We exceeded it. But their celebration was short-lived. Unknown to the humans, their test had been detected by hegemony sensor arrays positioned throughout the sector. Within hours, Sector Commander Irix Nathalan was reviewing the energy signatures with growing disbelief and rage. The primitive humans had done something impossible. They had taken refuse and forged it into a weapon that surpassed anything in the hegemony's arsenal. War was coming. The first indication that humanity's test hadn't gone unnoticed came 18 hours later when long-range sensors detected a hegemony task force changing course toward their position. Commander Greymark stood in the Situation Room, studying tactical displays that showed 3 battle cruisers and a dozen escort vessels moving at maximum burn. "Time to intercept?" she asked her tactical officer. 47 hours at current velocity," replied Lieutenant Axel Morvan, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "They're not trying to hide their approach. They want us to see them coming," Kex observed grimly. "Classic intimidation tactic. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, make an example of anyone who doesn't comply." The past day had been a whirlwind of activity as word of humanity's breakthrough spread through encrypted channels to every human settlement in the sector. The response had been immediate and unanimous. If the hegemony wanted a demonstration of human technological capability, they would get one. 17 mining stations, 4 agricultural colonies, and 2 deep space research facilities had begun, constructing their own versions of the synthesis engine. The weapon's design had been streamlined through collective effort, with each settlement contributing innovations and improvements. What had taken Perseverance 3 weeks to build could now be assembled in less than 48 hours using components every human facility possessed. "Ma'am," communications specialist Zara Tinnick called from her station, "I'm receiving a priority transmission from the hegemony fleet. They're demanding to speak with our commanding officer." Greymark straightened her uniform and nodded. "On screen." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the angular features of Sector Commander Irix Nethalan. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shifted between deep blue and purple depending on emotional state. Currently, it was trending toward an ominous dark violet. "Human Commander," Nethalan's voice carried the harmonic undertones, typical of his species, lending an almost musical quality to his obvious anger. "You will immediately cease all unauthorized technological development and surrender your facility for inspection." "Unauthorized?" Greymark kept her voice level. "I wasn't aware that the hegemony controlled human scientific research. You have been provided with salvage materials under strict agreements. The misuse of hegemony technology constitutes a violation of our accords and an act of aggression against a superior civilization." Keck stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "Superior? You threw this technology away, literally dumped it on us like garbage. We just figured out what you were too arrogant to teach." Nethalan's skin shifted to an almost black purple. "You will surrender now, or face the consequences of your presumption." "No," Greymark replied simply. "We will not." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the Situation Room in tense silence. Within minutes, sensors showed the hegemony fleet accelerating to attack velocity. "All hands, this is the commander," Greymark announced over the station-wide intercom. "Battle stations, this is not a drill. Prepare for hostile engagement." The next 36 hours transformed Perseverance from a mining station into a fortress. Mining equipment was repurposed into defensive systems, cargo bays were converted into additional weapon batteries, and every person aboard prepared for a fight none of them had ever imagined facing. Nim worked feverishly to calibrate their defensive systems. "The synthesis engine can fire approximately once every 8 minutes without overloading our reactors. We've got conventional weapons, but against hegemony armor, we make every shot count," Kex finished. "What's our response?" asked Commander Greymark, now bearing the title of Director General of the Human Technological Alliance. "We share the defensive technology," Kex replied without hesitation. "The hegemony maintained power by hoarding knowledge. We'll maintain our freedom by spreading it." The decision had been controversial among some human leaders, but the logic was undeniable. Every species that gained access to quantum-enhanced weapons became another ally, another voice demanding change from the established galactic order. Within months, the hegemony found itself facing not just human resistance, but a coalition of former client species armed with technology that made their ancient empire's weapons obsolete. Dr. Voss Rimmel had established the Quantum Research Consortium on the converted asteroid base New Prometheus, where scientists from 17 different species worked together to push the boundaries of what was possible. The hybrid technology that began with salvaged hegemony refuse had evolved into something entirely new, a fusion of multiple scientific traditions that achieved results no single species could have imagined. The crystalline matrices continue to demonstrate learning capabilities, he reported during the weekly Alliance briefing. We're now achieving quantum tunneling efficiencies that exceed our initial projections by 400%. But more importantly, we're beginning to understand the fundamental principles behind dimensional energy manipulation. Nim Kordash, now serving as Chief Technology Officer for the Alliance, nodded approvingly. The applications extend far beyond weapons. We're developing faster-than-light communication systems, resource replication technology, and medical devices that can heal injuries at the quantum level. The transformation wasn't limited to technology. The Battle of Sector 47 Delta had fundamentally altered how the galaxy viewed humanity. No longer were they the primitive species content to mine asteroids and accept scraps from their betters. They had become the catalyst for the greatest shift in galactic power since the hegemony's initial rise to dominance. High Imperator Quilanos, his authority diminished and his empire fragmenting, had retreated to the hegemony core worlds, where he faced growing calls for his removal from power. The disaster at Sector 47 Delta had exposed the fundamental weakness of a civilization built on assumed superiority rather than continued innovation. The humans have done more than defeat us in battle, he confided to his inner circle during a private council session. They have proven that our entire worldview was flawed. We believed that technological advancement had limits, that we had reached the pinnacle of what was possible. They showed us that there are no limits, only failures of imagination. War. Minister Corex Valdan, his military career in ruins after the loss of the 12th Battle Fleet, spoke with the bitter wisdom of defeat. They took our refuse and made it into something we couldn't match. Perhaps that says more about us than about them. Meanwhile, in human space, the work of building a new future continued. The Horizon's dawn had been joined by 7 sister ships, each one incorporating lessons learned from the previous battles. Mining operations had expanded to include exotic materials needed for quantum matrix production, while agricultural colonies developed hydroponic techniques that could feed the growing population of Alliance worlds. Captain Reyna Astolf, hero of the Great Battle, stood on the bridge of her ship as it patrolled the outer boundaries of human space. Her sensors detected a small hegemony vessel approaching under a flag of truce, a sight that would have been unthinkable just a year earlier. This is Science Vessel Inquiry's Edge requesting permission to enter human space, came the transmission. We carry hegemony researchers who wish to learn from your technological achievements. The request was forwarded to Director General Greymark, who approved it after consulting with the Alliance Council. The hegemony scientists who arrived were not the arrogant representatives of a superior civilization, but humbled scholars desperate to understand how they had been so thoroughly surpassed. Dr. Yex Morvain, former science minister of the hegemony, stood in the research laboratories of New Prometheus with an expression of wonder that would have shocked his former colleagues. Your integration of quantum consciousness with mechanical systems, it should be impossible according to our understanding of physics. That's what we thought too, replied Dr. Rimmel with a smile. But we discovered that impossible is just another engineering challenge waiting to be solved. The collaboration that followed produced breakthroughs that benefited every species in the Alliance. Hegemony theoretical knowledge combined with human practical innovation created technologies that seemed like magic to previous generations. Medical nanites that could repair genetic damage, terraforming systems that could transform dead worlds into gardens, and transportation networks that made interstellar travel as simple as stepping through a doorway. As Kex stood watching the construction of humanity's newest research station, he reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had begun with refuse, literal garbage that the hegemony had thrown away without a second thought. But in that refuse, humanity had seen potential. They had seen possibility where others saw waste. Nim, he called to his longtime partner and collaborator. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the hegemony had just treated us as equals from the beginning? She considered the question while watching a transport ship dock, its holds full of exotic materials from a dozen different worlds. Maybe we would have been content to remain mining colonies forever. Maybe we needed to be underestimated to realize what we were capable of achieving. The irony is perfect, Kex mused. They gave us their trash because they thought we were too primitive to understand its value. In doing so, they gave us the tools to prove them wrong. Across the galaxy, the changes continued to ripple outward. Former hegemony client species declared independence with increasing frequency, often armed with alliance-provided defensive systems. New trade routes opened as previously suppressed civilizations emerged to share their own unique technologies and perspectives. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for millennia was giving way to something unprecedented, a truly cooperative interstellar community. The Corvanian hegemony still existed, but as one power among many, rather than the dominant force it had once been. Some of its worlds had joined the alliance voluntarily, their populations eager to participate in the technological renaissance that humanity had sparked. Others remained isolated, clinging to the old ways while the galaxy moved forward around them. On Perseverance, the mining station that had become the unlikely capital of a new age, a memorial was erected to commemorate the Battle of Sector 47 Delta. But the inscription didn't celebrate military victory or technological supremacy. Instead, it carried a simple message that captured the essence of humanity's greatest achievement. They handed us trash, we made a cutter that tore through them. But more importantly, we made a future that included everyone. Director General Greymark stood before the memorial during its dedication ceremony, addressing representatives from hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. We didn't set out to change the galaxy, she said. We just refused to accept that being underestimated meant we had to stay underestimated. Today, we stand not as conquerors, but as proof that every species, every individual has the potential to exceed their apparent limitations. The ceremony concluded with a demonstration of the latest Alliance technology, a synthesis engine modified not for destruction, but for creation. The device reached out across space to a nearby asteroid, its quantum fields restructuring matter at the molecular level. Within minutes, the lifeless rock had been transformed into a garden world, complete with atmosphere, oceans, and the foundation for new life. As the assembled delegates watched this miracle of science and cooperation, Kex reflected on the long journey from that first day when hegemony refuse had crashed onto their loading dock. They had indeed made a cutter that tore through their enemies, but they had made something far more valuable in the process. A future where the galaxy's greatest achievements came not from dominance, but from collaboration. The age of the hegemony was over. The age of the Alliance had begun, and it all started with garbage that became something greater than those who threw it away could ever have imagined. The status on the other settlements? 14 have confirmed weapon systems online. The SciFi, others will be ready within hours. Greymark reviewed the tactical situation with grim satisfaction. For the first time since contact, we're not helpless. As the hegemony fleet approached, final preparations continued around the clock. Families were evacuated to the station's most heavily shielded sections, while volunteers took positions at newly installed weapon systems. The mining crews, accustomed to working in the dangerous environment of space, adapted quickly to their new roles as defenders. "Commander," Lieutenant Morven called out, his voice tight with tension. "Enemy fleet dropping out of hyperspace. Range, 50,000 kilometers and closing." Through the observation ports, the approaching hegemony vessels were visible as bright stars against the darkness. Their sleek forms radiated power and confidence, the accumulated might of a civilization that had never known defeat at the hands of a primitive species. "Open a channel to the fleet," Greymark ordered. Nathalan's image appeared once more, his features twisted with contempt. "This is your final opportunity to surrender, humans. Submit now, and your deaths will be swift." "Commander Nathalan," Greymark replied calmly, "let me introduce you to something we humans call standing up for ourselves." She nodded to Kex, who activated the synthesis engine. The weapon's first shot tore through space like a spear of concentrated starlight, its reality-warping effects visible even at extreme range. It struck the lead battlecruiser's shields, and didn't simply overload them, it unraveled them at the quantum level, reducing the energy barriers to their component particles. The second shot punched through the cruiser's hull as if it were constructed of paper, emerging from the far side in a spray of superheated metal and atmosphere. In the sudden silence that followed, Commander Nathalan stared at his tactical displays in absolute disbelief. The primitive humans had just crippled a hegemony battlecruiser with a single volley. The destruction of the hegemony battlecruiser, Sovereign Talon, sent shockwaves through both fleets. On the bridge of the remaining command vessel, Sector Commander Nathalan watched in disbelief as his most powerful ship listed helplessly, atmosphere venting from multiple hull breaches. "Damage report," he barked, his skin cycling through shades of purple so rapidly it appeared to strobe. "The Sovereign Talon reports catastrophic damage to decks 7 through 15, his tactical officer replied, voice trembling. "Their quantum matrices are offline, life support failing in multiple sections. Commander Kyleth is requesting immediate evacuation." Nathalan's mind reeled. The humans had struck with a weapon that bypassed hegemony shields entirely, cutting through quantum-stabilized armor plating as if it didn't exist. In 3 millennia of conquest, no enemy had ever achieved such devastating results with a single shot. All vessels, combat formation Delta 7. Focus fire on the human station. Eliminate them before they can fire again. But the humans weren't finished. As the hegemony fleet maneuvered into attack position, Perseverance revealed additional surprises. Mining lasers that had been modified. With salvaged hegemony plasma conduits opened fire, their beams no longer the simple cutting tools they once were. Each shot now carried quantum-enhanced destructive potential that carved through escort vessel armor with contemptuous ease. "Sir," Communications Specialist Tinnock reported, "I'm receiving tactical data from the other human settlements. 14 facilities report weapons ready. They're requesting target assignments." Commander Greymark allowed herself a tight smile. "Patch me through to all stations. Full network coordination." Across the sector, human voices crackled over subspace. Channels as mining stations, agricultural colonies, and research facilities transformed into nodes of a distributed weapons network. The hegemony fleet found itself facing not a single target, but an entire civilization that had suddenly learned to bite back. "Hegemony vessel Crimson Destiny, this is Ceres Mining Station. You are in our targeting solution. Recommend immediate. Course change." "Knight's Edge, this is Research Platform Galileo. Our synthesis engine is locked onto your position. This is your only warning." The psychological impact was immediate. For centuries, hegemony forces had operated with the absolute confidence that their technological superiority made them invincible. Now, each human facility they passed represented a potential threat capable of destroying their most powerful vessels. Nathalan's fleet began to fragment as individual captains, faced with targeting warnings from multiple human installations, broke formation to avoid what they perceived as death traps. The coordinated assault devolved into a scattered retreat as vessel after vessel abandoned the attack to preserve their own ships. "Sir," the tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we're detecting additional human energy signatures throughout the sector. They have at least 23 weapon platforms online." "Impossible," Nathalan snarled. Intelligence reports indicated primitive mining operations minimal defensive capability. Intelligence was wrong, sir. Meanwhile, on Perseverance, Chief Engineer Kex monitored the tactical display with growing satisfaction. Nim, are you seeing this? They're actually running. Some of them are, Nim replied, highlighting several vessels on the display. But look at these three. They're maintaining course and charging weapons. The approaching ships were smaller than the crippled battle cruiser, but moved with deadly purpose. As they closed range, their plasma batteries opened fire, sending brilliant bolts of destructive energy toward the human station. Evasive maneuvers, Greymark commanded, though everyone knew the massive mining station's mobility was severely limited. The first plasma bolts struck their defensive screens, energy cascading across jury-rigged shield generators that groaned under the assault. Warning klaxons wailed as power fluctuations rippled through the station's systems. Shields down to 60%, reported Chief Power Technician Handel. We can't take many more hits like that. Then we don't intend to, Kex replied grimly. He initiated the synthesis engine's charging sequence, watching as hybrid systems built from human ingenuity and hegemony salvage prepared to deliver death across the void. The second volley from their impossible weapon caught two escort vessels. Simultaneously, the reality-warping beam splitting at the quantum level to engage multiple targets. Both ships simply ceased to exist, their molecular bonds unraveling as the weapon's exotic effects propagated through their hull structures. The third vessel, seeing the fate of its companions, attempted to retreat. It never made it. A modified mining laser from the station's industrial section, enhanced with crystalline matrices, salvaged from hegemony refuse, reached out across space to core the fleeing ship from stern to bow. All hegemony vessels, Commander Greymark broadcast. On all frequencies, this is your final warning. Leave this sector immediately or share the fate of your companions. The retreat began in earnest as the surviving ships, including Nathalan's command vessel, turned away from the human installations and began accelerating toward the hyperspace transition point. But even as they fled, Nathalan was already composing the report that would change everything. The humans had somehow weaponized hegemony technology, creating devices that surpassed anything in the sector's arsenal. This was no longer a matter of colonial administration. It was an existential threat to hegemony supremacy. As the last enemy vessel vanished into hyperspace, cheers erupted throughout Perseverance and across every human installation in the sector. For the first time since contact, they had not only stood their ground against hegemony aggression, they had won decisively. But Kex, staring at the tactical display showing the debris of destroyed enemy vessels, knew this was only the beginning. They had bloodied the nose of a galactic empire. Retaliation would come, and next time, it would be with everything the hegemony could bring to bear. Nim, he said quietly, start working on production line specifications for the synthesis engine. We're going to need a lot more of them. The emergency session of the Hegemony War Council convened in the obsidian halls of the Imperial homeworld, Corvantis Prime. Representatives from across the Empire's 1,000-star systems gathered via quantum telepresence, their holographic forms, filling the vast amphitheater with a spectrum of alien physiologies united in shock and rage. High Imperator Vex Quillanos, ancient beyond measure and ruler of the hegemony for over 8 centuries, listened to Sector Commander Nathalan's report with an expression of cold fury. His species lived for millennia, and in his long existence, he had never encountered a defeat of this magnitude at the hands of what the Empire considered a primitive species. You allowed a mining station, a single mining station, to destroy 3 of our vessels? The Imperator's voice carried harmonic frequencies that made the chamber's crystalline walls resonate ominously. High Imperator, Nathalan replied, his skin pale with shame. The humans have somehow reverse-engineered our quantum matrix technology. Their weapons exhibit properties that exceed our theoretical maximums for dimensional energy manipulation. War Minister Corex Valdan, a hulking representative from the Empire's primary military caste, stepped forward. Impossible. Our salvage protocols specifically select only obsolete or damaged components. Nothing provided to client species should contain active quantum matrices. Nevertheless, they have them, Nathalan insisted. Our intelligence networks are reporting similar weapon signatures from 23 separate human installations. They've weaponized our refuse and turned it against us. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives processed the implications. The hegemony's power structure was built on technological supremacy, the absolute certainty that no client species could challenge their masters. If humans could not only match but exceed hegemony weapons technology, it called into question the fundamental assumptions of imperial rule. The solution is obvious, declared Fleet Admiral Yax Tenarian, her six-armed form gesturing dismissively. Deploy the 12th Battle Fleet. Reduce every human installation to component atoms. Make an example that will discourage other client species from similar presumption. And if they have more weapons than we anticipated? Challenged Science Minister Drac Morvain. Our reports indicate they constructed these devices in a matter of weeks. If they can mass-produce weapons that destroy our battle cruisers. The uncomfortable silence that followed spoke volumes. For the first time in millennia, the hegemony faced an enemy that might actually pose a threat to their continued existence. Meanwhile, in the human sector, the weeks following their victory had been a whirlwind of preparation. Every human settlement had become a weapons factory, with mining equipment retrofitted to produce synthesis engines and their associated systems. The design had been refined through collective effort, with innovations shared instantly across the growing network of armed installations. Dr. Voss Rimmel had made another breakthrough while studying the quantum-entangled particles within salvaged hegemony crystals. We're not just reverse engineering their technology, he explained to the gathered representatives from across human space. We're improving it. The holographic conference included voices from settlements throughout the sector, mining stations, agricultural colonies, research facilities, and even the massive generation ships that had brought humanity to this region of space decades earlier. The quantum tunneling efficiency can be increased by another 30% if we adjust the crystalline matrix frequency, added Dr. Elin Koshek from the research platform New Endeavor. We've also discovered that the hegemony hasn't fully exploited the dimensional bridging potential of their own technology. Commander Greymark coordinated the discussion from Perseverance, which had become the de facto capital of human resistance. How many synthesis engines can we field if the hegemony returns in force? Current production estimates suggest 47 primary weapon systems within 6 weeks, reported Industrial Coordinator Jorik Voss from the Titan Manufacturing Complex. Additionally, we've developed smaller-scale versions that can be mounted on mining ships and transport vessels. The transformation was remarkable. Humanity's scattered, vulnerable colonies were becoming a distributed military network that could strike across vast distances with weapons that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. Each installation remained focused on its primary purpose, mining, agriculture, research, but all were now capable of defending themselves and their neighbors. Kex had been working on the most ambitious project yet, a mobile weapons platform built into the hull of a decommissioned generation ship. The vessel Horizon's Dawn had brought 50,000 humans to this sector 30 years earlier and had been scheduled for scrapping. Instead, it was being transformed into a dreadnought that would make hegemony battlecruisers look like escort vessels. The quantum matrix arrays are online, Nim reported as they toured the massive ship's converted interior. We've integrated 17 synthesis engines with overlapping firing solutions, plus conventional weapons enhanced with salvaged hegemony plasma conduits. Crew requirements? Surprisingly minimal. The hybrid control systems practically run themselves once properly calibrated. We'll need maybe 200 personnel for full operations. As they spoke, long-range sensors detected the emergence of a massive fleet at the edge of the system. The hegemony had returned, and this time, they hadn't come with a single task force. "Commander Greymark to all stations," the announcement crackled across human space. Long-range sensors are detecting approximately 200 hegemony vessels inbound. This is not a punitive expedition. This is an extermination fleet. The response from humanity's scattered installations was immediate and defiant. Across dozens of worlds and stations, humans who had spent their lives mining asteroids and growing crops in hydroponic bays now prepared to face an empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. All synthesis engines report ready. "Status," came the collective response from 47 installations. "We are prepared for engagement." High Imperator Quillanos himself commanded the massive fleet aboard the super dreadnought Eternal Dominion, a vessel the size of a small moon that had never before been deployed against a client species. Around it, battle cruisers, destroyers, and support vessels formed a formation that had conquered star systems and subjugated entire civilizations. "Open communications with the human settlements," the Imperator commanded. When the channel connected, his ancient voice carried the weight of millennia. "Humans of Sector 47 Delta, you have committed acts of aggression against the Corvanian hegemony. Surrender immediately, and your extinction will be swift. Resist, and we will ensure that your species serves as an example to the galaxy of the UI. Price of defying your betters." Commander Greymark's response came from Perseverance, but it was echoed by every human voice in the sector. "High Imperator, let us introduce you to a human concept called fighting for our freedom." The Horizon's Dawn dropped out of hyperspace directly above the hegemony formation, its 17 synthesis engines charging with a harmonic resonance that made space itself seem to sing. The battle for humanity's survival began with a display of firepower that redefined the nature of space combat. The converted generation ship Horizon's Dawn unleashed its full arsenal in a coordinated strike that sent 17 streams of reality-warping energy cascading through the hegemony formation. The effects were catastrophic. Quantum-enhanced beams tore through the Empire's most advanced shields as if they were decorative light shows, each strike unraveling the fundamental forces that held enemy vessels together. 3 battle cruisers simply ceased to exist, their molecular bonds disrupted at the subatomic level. 2 more suffered catastrophic damage that left them drifting hulks, atmosphere and crew spilling into the void. High Imperator Quillanos watched from the bridge of the Eternal Dominion as his supposedly invincible fleet took losses that should have been impossible. "How is this happening?" he demanded, his ancient voice cracking with disbelief. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the human weapons are operating on principles we don't fully understand. They're not just exceeding our theoretical maximums. They're rewriting the rules of quantum mechanics." The truth was both simpler and more complex than the hegemony realized. Humanity's breakthrough hadn't come from superior understanding of the technology they'd salvaged, but from their willingness to experiment, to fail, to try approaches that the rigid hegemony scientific establishment would have dismissed as impossible. Dr. Voss Rimmel, monitoring the battle from research platform New Endeavor, watched as human weapons performed beyond their wildest expectations. They built their technology around the assumption that certain physical laws were absolute, he explained to his research team. "We built ours around the assumption that every law can be bent if you push hard enough." The hegemony fleet, designed for overwhelming enemies through sheer firepower and technological superiority, found itself outgunned by mining stations and agricultural colonies. Each human installation had become a fortress, their synthesis engines capable of engaging targets, at ranges that made conventional space combat obsolete. "Crimson Destiny reports critical damage to quantum matrices," came the panicked transmission from one of the hegemony battlecruisers. "Requesting immediate support." "Negative," High Imperator Quillanos commanded coldly. "All vessels will maintain formation and continue the attack. The humans cannot possibly sustain this rate of fire." But they could. And they did. The hybrid technology that merged human engineering with salvaged hegemony components proved remarkably efficient, capable of sustained operation that exceeded anything in the Empire's arsenal. Mining reactors, designed to operate continuously for decades, provided the power needed to keep the exotic weapons online indefinitely. Commander Greymark coordinated the defense from Perseverance, her voice calm, despite the magnitude of the battle raging around them. Titan Station, focus fire on the heavy cruiser at bearing 27 Mark 6. New Endeavor, you have the destroyer formation approaching from galactic north. Confirmed, Perseverance, came the reply from Industrial Coordinator Voss. Firing solutions locked. Engaging now. The battle raged across three-dimensional space as human installations, mining ships, and converted civilian vessels engaged an Empire's finest fleet. What should have been a massacre became something unprecedented, a technological underdog systematically dismantling a superior force through innovation, determination, and sheer human stubbornness. Chief Engineer Kex, aboard the Horizon's Dawn, watched as their mobile weapons platform carved through the enemy formation like a scythe through wheat. Nim, are you getting these readings? The quantum matrices are actually improving with use. The crystals are learning, she replied with wonderment. Each firing cycle optimizes the quantum tunneling pathways. The weapons are becoming more efficient through combat experience. The revelation sent a chill through both fleets. The humans hadn't just reverse-engineered hegemony technology, they had created something that evolved, that improved itself through use. Each shot fired made the next one more devastating. High. Imperator Quilanos, witnessing the systematic destruction of his fleet, made a decision that would echo through galactic history. All vessels, prepare to ram the human installations. If we cannot defeat them with weapons, we will destroy them through sacrifice. The order sent shockwaves through the hegemony fleet. To ram enemy targets was considered an act of desperation beneath the dignity of the Empire's elite forces. But faced with weapons that made their most advanced technology obsolete, desperation was all they had left. Sir, the tactical officer protested, ramming attacks will result in the loss of all vessels. The fleet will be entirely... The fleet is already lost, Quilanos interrupted, his ancient voice heavy with the weight of impending defeat. Better to die maintaining the honor of the hegemony than to flee in disgrace. But as the surviving enemy vessels began their final approach, engines burning at maximum output in suicidal charges toward human installations, they encountered one more surprise. The Horizon's Dawn positioned itself between the largest group of ramming vessels and the civilian stations they targeted. "This is Captain Reyna Astolf of the Horizon's Dawn," came the transmission across all frequencies. "Any hegemony vessel that wants to harm our people will have to go through us first." The converted generation ship opened fire with everything. It had its 17 synthesis engines working in perfect coordination to create interlocking fields of destructive energy. The ramming vessels flew directly into this killing field, their hulls disintegrating before they could reach their targets in the space of 10 minutes, the Corvanian hegemony's 12th battle fleet ceased to exist as an effective fighting force. Of the 200 vessels that had entered the system with absolute confidence in their superiority, fewer than 30 remained operational. The rest were debris, expanding clouds of metal and atmosphere that marked the graves of an empire's arrogance. High Imperator Quilanos, aboard the crippled Eternal Dominion, stared at his tactical displays in complete disbelief. His super dreadnought, the pride of the hegemony fleet, had taken 17 direct hits from human weapons and was barely maintaining life support. "Open a channel to the human commander," he ordered, his voice hollow with defeat. Commander Greymark appeared on his screen, her expression showing none of the triumphant gloating he might have expected. "High Imperator. Your terms for our surrender?" he asked simply. Leave this sector and never return. Spread the word throughout your empire. Humanity is no longer your client species. We are your equals, and we will defend ourselves against any who think otherwise. The surviving hegemony vessels limped away from the battlefield, carrying with them news that would transform the galaxy. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Corvanian hegemony had been decisively defeated, not by another empire or advanced civilization, but by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The age of human weakness was over. 6 months after the Battle of Sector 47 Delta, the galaxy was a very different place. News of humanity's impossible victory had spread through every star system carried by traders, diplomats, and the defeated hegemony forces themselves. The empire that had ruled unchallenged for 3 millennia now found itself facing rebellions, independence movements, and demands for technological parity from dozens of client species. Chief Engineer Kex stood in the observation deck of the newly commissioned Humanity's Pride, the first purpose-built human dreadnought to roll out of the expanded shipyards orbiting Perseverance. Around him, the once quiet mining sector hummed with activity as construction platforms, research facilities, and defensive installations formed the heart of what was becoming known as the Human Technological Alliance. The delegation from the Altarian Confederation is requesting technical specifications for the synthesis engine, reported communications specialist Tinnick, now serving as humanity's first Secretary of Interstellar Affairs. They're offering exclusive mining rights to 3 star systems in exchange for defensive weapons. What?